Good evening, everybody, and welcome. My name is Vijay Thomas. I'm the president of the Indo-Canada Chamber of Commerce, and it's an honor and a privilege to have our panelists today for the discussion that we're going to have. If you may just go back to the previous slide, we'll just go over this once. Our title today is 0 to 100 in 365 days. Now, some of you might wonder what kind of a title is that? 0 to 100 in 365 days. This is not how soon a car will accelerate. It's not how soon anything moves from some place to another. What we were wanting to talk about here was how do we get new immigrants to 100% of their potential within 365 days, within a year of landing. How do we get them to at their peak potential? And today with us, we have Debroy Chan, Vice President, Programs and Operation at the Toronto Regional Immigrant Employment Council, TRIAC. We have George Abraham, Founder, Publisher, and Executive Director of New Canadian Media. We have Ruby Latif, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Consultant. And we have Sharifa Khan, CEO and President of Balmoral Marketing, Ethnic Marketing Consultancy. And welcome everybody on Facebook and also on Zoom. It's wonderful to have all of you. If you're joining in for the first time, welcome. If you're joining our Thursday Talk series and you're somebody that's coming to another one of our Thursday Talks, thank you very much. Really, really appreciate you, all of you coming there. And as we go through the session, if you have any questions, you can ask those questions if you're on Zoom, within the Zoom, or on Facebook in comments. With that out of the way, I think my introduction is already done, but we'll come to what are we going to be talking about today. Again, we talked about how, there's always the stories of how you had a neurosurgeon as a taxi driver. And I was speaking to Minister Vic Fideli, and he actually said that is true. There was a doorman at the Hyatt who was a neurosurgeon in his country, but here didn't have the time or the opportunity or the money to go back and get into neurosurgery. So this is, I think, some of those areas where we want to talk about, either in your own field, or could you be retrained to get into another field where you can do as well. Now, if you're a neurosurgeon, you understand medicine. You probably cannot use a scalpel in Canada, but you can possibly be doing research. You can do other things that does not need those skills. So I think we want to talk about that. We've got a great panel here. And then, how do new immigrants look at, getting their skills? How do they market themselves? All of that is what we want to talk about today. So with that, we'll just move to a little bit about the ICCC Small Business Assist Program. This is a program that we started last year for small businesses and professionals. If you're feel yourself in a little bit of a corner because of COVID or because of anything that's happening in the professional environment or in your business, feel free to give us a call or send an email to ICCC@icconline.org. Just say Small Business Assist Program in the subject line, and we will connect you to an expert. And this is free. The first hour is free. And in most cases, people want somebody to talk to. And if you've got a problem in accounting, in finance, technology, we'll have somebody to talk to you. So that is the ICCC Small Business Assist Program. We have a little disclaimer, which kind of makes sure that nobody can sue us at the end of this program. The information that we're going to be giving out here is for general information purposes only, does not constitute legal or professional advice. There's a bit of things there that you can all read up, and right at the bottom, the views expressed by speakers are their own personal opinion and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or the position of the ICCC. So with that out of the way, I think we're going to start off. We're going to start off with Sharifa Khan. Because she's dressed in red, but no, that's not the reason. We got her going first. So Sharifa, we will have you present. The way the format will be that everybody's going to have maybe 5 to 7 minutes of time to go over what they want to say. And then we'll have a panel discussion and where we will take questions as well.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Vijay. Thank you. Uh, Welcome, everybody. I think there's a lot of members that are logged on for this webinar. It's such a pleasure for me to be on this channel because these are all very distinguished guests and many of us actually know each other. I'm happy to say that over the years, I have many collaborations with ICCC. I'm definitely a fan of your organization and the wonderful things that you've done. So from what I've known to be today is where there is that I'm going to impart to you some guidance, particularly within my own sphere, as to how to help you on your journey, prepare your journey towards employment. So my company is established 30 years ago to serve ethnic communities. And my mission and motto has always been building bridges of understanding. And my job has always mission is always to introduce mainstream Canada, corporate and government, the importance and potential of diverse immigrants in Canada, to show that they are skilled, trained, professional, full of experience from their home country. And also these immigrants could be potential client of theirs. Over the years, we have our company, myself, we have provided many opportunities to new immigrants and temporary workers as interns, and also even student visa students, which and for opportunity to them to at least to have the first start, to have the first experience, and many of these individuals actually have stayed on and have grown organically, and some really actually reach management stage. But for those that did not, we are happy to provide them with what we're calling the first Canadian work experience, which is always the first barrier all the time that I've heard time and time again when an immigrant is applying for a job. And also what has actually inspired me for my company with these objectives was that it actually was my father. He came years ago and he was assistant editor of South China Morning Post, the top English newspaper in Hong Kong. When he came here, nobody, Toronto Star, Globe and Mail, they would not hire him because they said, hey, you don't have Canadian experience. He could write better than anybody at the desk, at the editorial desk. So he took at least a year and a half, 2 years to try to find a job to no avail. But he was fluid. He was able to accept the situation. And he ended up as a communication manager at one of the pharmaceutical company. So this is why this is my mission, not only as a business, but also to help immigrant. And I myself is an immigrant that came many years ago. The second is a snapshot of hope. I know that many of you arrived this year, which is actually very difficult in time of COVID, even though you have skill sets, education, and work experience. But I have to tell you that there is a silver lining, because right now, there will be and will continue to be, there is going to be 9 million baby boomers that have started retiring and will continue to retire till the end of this decade. Okay, so you guys that are here that are coming in your 30s and 40s, absolutely, because there will be companies that will have job shortage, and they're really trying to go out there and look for talents. That's a good thing, for 9 million of them to be retiring. And also another thing is Canada has low birth rate. I think the last time I checked, it was 1.2 child. So they really need you to ramp up the labor force. In particular, they need your tax dollar. And what does it mean that for immigrants? Which means that you will see employers competing for your services, and which means you would have better employment, and that will be the salaries. I do not want to, in a sense, I know it's not a good time as COVID, but there is a silver lining out there because of this data that I've showed you. So the next one is your first job. Besides landing, getting an apartment, your bank, your phone, get your child registered to school. What is your first job? Your first job is finding a job. It has to be 100% job. And the next one is the 4 P's of finding a job. Like the 4 P's of marketing, which is product, price, place, and promotion. The 4 P's are people, perception, persistence, and profession. For people, meeting people is the most important integral role in landing the first break. I know it is hard because you have left behind your profession, your network, but it is very important you have to start your new network all over again because you will never know who will be referring you for your first gig. To be frank, 80% of my business comes from networking and also from referral. Only 20% are really from RFP. And when I mean networking, the the first mistakes a lot of immigrants come is that they network only within their own race. They only network with South Asians. Not that the chamber is not good, but you should really be going to like the mainstream Toronto Board of Trade, the Rotary Club, the Kiwanis Club, Chamber of Commerce. And even if you're not paying for the fee, at least you should volunteer. Make sure you get your foot in there because you will know a lot of people. And most importantly, of course, I'm sure a lot of you in LinkedIn, religious groups, maybe a church or a mosque, you would be able to meet people, community groups, and all those mainstream groups, I could not stress more. And also with long-time acquaintance. I have been referred a number of my staff that they were college friends and they know that we are hiring and they got interview and they were hired. So reacquaint with your high school and college friends that are here, and also talk to people. You always tell children, don't talk to strangers, but I'm saying to you, talk to strangers, talk to people that you feel that on Go Train and TTC. And I love talking to Uber drivers. My God, the information they can tell you is phenomenal. So these are the things you have to be very opening your eyes and said, I'm not just going to talk Hindi and Punjabi and just my few the friends here. I really got to venture out to talking at different. And also perception. Perception is the biggest barrier when you're going for your first job, because it's the way your name sounds, your resume, and many of the reasons that perception are built, and even the way you walk into that interview. With HR interview, no matter how qualified you are but if you are not communicating effectively with your language, which is your diction, your pronunciation, no matter what information you're giving to them, they couldn't understand you. So how good would that be? So you got to look at it and also look at how to be able to improve on that, because communication in language is the most important thing that you have to have when you are coming across. Recruiters are not looking just for your qualification and experience, but they're also gauging as to how you fit into their ecosystem, into their organization. How do you overcome these challenges? You have to be like a sponge. I was like a sponge to everything Canadiana. And you have to soak in as much as possible to hold a conversation. You have to know what are the current things that happen in Canada, what are some of the sports, what are the politics, the values of the politics, and also what are some of the things that are trending in their entertainment world. And of course, they would say things like which you have to get to know to use. Instead of saying about, they would say a boat. They would be in elevator. We would say lift, they would say elevator. We say lorry, they would say. So these are some of the things that you have to pay attention to, able to improve the perception of yourself towards the mainstream. And the last thing is persistence. Persistent. You are not going to ignore the job that is available right in front of you. Because if you can keep the eyes out for something of your profession, but those can be your stepping stone. And it can be a survival job for you, and which is your first way to get what we call Canadian experience. And I can tell a true story that there's an agency profession. He came here, couldn't find anything, got into a call center, And then during this time, improved on his verbal skills and Canadian insights. And now he works at one of the global mainstream agency. The other one actually is a staff of mine that he worked at a brand, luxurious brand company. He came here, couldn't find job, work at Nordstrom as a salesperson, you know, and that's quite a few step. But because of his persistent, he helped, and then he was able to learn what is the buying behavior of Canadians towards the brand. That's so important to us for his learning. Then he landed a job as a group account director at the agency. This is what I call persistent. Profession, we hit the start button, leaving your comfort zone, but you have to continue and said that I might not be able to get what I'm used to. So how about changing to real estate, being a real estate agent? Be fluid, be flexible, because nowadays real estate agent is making a lot of money than if you are just a professional. Right now, the market is hot. To ask Vijay, he knows it's hot, hot, hot. And you can be a lawyer. There are lawyers that change into they are professional coach. So you have to look at, do you have to absolutely follow the calling or the profession? Maybe a new calling would actually give you a second career and also a better future. The last page I have is what we call, I would like all of you to be able to achieve, is called dual life, life of duality, where you will be able, because Canada is a land of multiculturalism, where you will be able to maintain the good, which is the culture, the language of your home country, and the better, attain the better of embracing Canadian culture and tradition. The beauty of Canada is that you can live within your ethnic life at home and your country, whatever the tradition is, and also live a mainstream life outside and be able to acculturate and assimilate and be a true Canadian. So, and that you can actually, it's possible for you to enjoy the best of both worlds. Thank you very much. That's my presentation.
Thank you, Sharifa. That was fantastic. I think I've got a lot from there. The 4 Ps, you know, the dual life, which you know is also the hyphenated, you know, Indo-Canadian. We're all hyphenated people, so and we're proud of it, and we're still mainstream. I think that's a great message out there. So with that, we will move to the next speaker. We have Debroy Chan, Vice President, Programs and Operation for TRIAC. Debroy, if you can give us a brief about yourself, you can do it best, and you know, and then go to your presentation.
Thank you, Vijay. And thanks to the organizers for the opportunity to be part of this discussion. You know, as an immigrant myself, it's always great to be able to be a part of these discussions. For myself, I came to Canada in 2008. And actually it was during a recession. And so you can imagine how difficult it was to find a job in those days. But anyway, I came from an HR background and managed to get into something that was not HR, but where I could utilize the skills that I had. I became a mentoring coach and then manager of mentoring services at JBS Toronto. And since then, I've been involved in a number of immigrant servant programs, Employment Ontario, Local Immigration Partnership, Toronto North, pre-arrival services, mentoring services, and so on. So I do have some, you know, some experience in programs that help newcomers. I've been with Toronto Regional Immigrant Employment Council for the last 4 years. Overseeing some of the programs there. Actually, I oversee all the programs here right now. So I will start by talking a little bit about TRIAC. On this slide, I have the vision and the mission. I won't read those for you. I'll talk a little bit about the programs. TRIAC Mentoring Partnership is actually an occupation-specific mentoring program that matches skilled immigrants to people who are experienced professionals in Canada. It could be immigrants as well, but people who have had at least 2 to 3 years experience in their occupation in Canada. And the whole purpose of this is, well, it's actually threefold. It's first of all, to help them to understand the Canadian workplace culture, to get information about their industry in Canada, and very importantly, and Sharifa mentioned this a lot in her presentation, is helping them to build their professional networks in Canada, because we know that when professionals come to Canada, they leave their professional networks behind, and we know how important that is to job search in Canada. No, sorry, please go back. Yeah. So we do about 2,200 matches a year through this program. So it's I think one of the biggest mentoring programs in Canada. And then we have the Professional Immigrant Networks Initiative. This is really a huge network of immigrant associations. We currently have a membership of 83 immigrant associations, along with 66 active partners. And these associations are all volunteer-led associations like ICCC. One of their purposes, or their primary purpose, is to help their members, their newcomer members, to find employment. And so they provide different kinds of supports. Now, our role with PINS is to work with the leaders to help build the capacity of the leadership to be able to better serve their members, to promote the immigrant networks as a pipeline for immigrant talent, and to encourage collaboration amongst all of these various associations that exist in the GTA. Now, I've always said that you can prepare newcomers as much as you want. If employers are not prepared to offer the jobs, then you're not going to get anywhere. And so part of our work is also to work with employers on their diversity and inclusion initiatives. And so we have a learning hub on TRIAC, on the TRIAC website, which has over 400 resources of different kinds. Many of them for employers, but some of them for newcomers as well. We also work directly with employers to help them create more inclusive workplaces. So we do strategic consultations with them. We have an inclusive competency framework that they can implement within their organization. We have tools that can help them to measure how inclusive they are. You will know that, the saying that what gets measured gets done. We have a community of practice of employers, and we have a certificate in inclusive leadership training for leaders within organizations, leaders as well as people who are responsible for D&I initiatives within the organizations. So that's a brief summary of the work that we do. So we'll move on. So what are the challenges that newcomers face when they land in Canada? One is the non-recognition of their qualifications and experience. We've all heard of the issue, the problem of Canadian experience and employers wanting Canadian experience. Someone got so frustrated that they said to the employer, well, where can I get some of that Canadian experience to buy? Obviously. And then Canadian workplace culture. Many people come from a very, very different culture, including the culture that exists within workplaces. And so I've heard of so many cases of people who actually got their first job, but couldn't keep it. They couldn't retain those jobs because they didn't fit into the workplace culture and the environment, and that created friction. So it's very important to learn something about the Canadian workplace culture, and that's part of what our mentoring program does. And then, of course, so much has been already said about the lack of professional networks. And I will say more about that. So if you can move on to, so what are they, how can we address, how can a newcomer address some of this? First thing is there are a lot of nonprofit organizations out there that provide free employment support services funded by the government of Canada, as well as the government of Ontario. Please, leverage these services. Sometimes we make the mistake that because we are so highly qualified, we are so highly experienced that we don't need those supports. We do, believe me. I mentioned mentoring. We last year we completed an evaluation of the TRIAC mentoring partnership by an independent consulting firm, and a couple of things that it showed, and we compared the performance of newcomers who were in the mentoring program as against a control group, those who did not have access to a mentoring program. And what we found out is that those people who were in mentoring programs were 2.5 times more likely to be in good quality jobs, and almost 4 times more likely to expand their network after 3 months of being in the program. So it's a very useful tool, a useful program. Networking, I mentioned that again. Information interviews. Those are ways of getting to know people, getting to know about the organization, and you should target organizations and sectors in which you're interested in working. Training. A lot of newcomers, when they come, the first thing they do is that they register for training programs. Be strategic about the kind of training that you wanna get. It's important. Don't waste money on all kinds of training just for the sake of it. And in applying for jobs, do a lot of research. Research those those employers that are more likely to recruit immigrants. Research about the organization before you apply for a job. Know as much as you can about the organization. Identify what are the essential requirements of the job. We have a way in Canada when we're writing job descriptions to put a laundry list of requirements. And sometimes immigrants feel that if they don't have all of those, then really they don't have a chance. That's not the case. Identify which of the requirements are the essential requirements of the job, and those are the ones that you should be looking at. And have others review your application before you send it on. And I'll stop. Next slide. Yeah. So I'll end by talking a little bit about employers. I think, the business case for diversity has been made. There is literature on that now. And so I think many employers are aware of this. Diversity improves. It has been proven that diversity improves productivity as well as innovation. The problem that employers have is that many of them do not know how best to go about making their workplaces more inclusive. It's all well and good to recruit diverse people, but once they get into the organization, you have to, for you to get the best out of them, your workplace has to be inclusive and the environment has to be created for that. And so one of the things we do is help employers with that, with creating diverse as well as inclusive workplaces. And I've probably gone over my time, so I'll stop there. And as I said, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Yeah. So thank you, Deborah. We'll come back to you, and I think people have got a good flavor of what TRIAC does, and thank you very much for making time to be here today. With that, we'll move to our next speaker, George Abraham from New Canadian Media. He established New Canadian Media in 2011, and I'll let him do the rest of his own introduction, as well as take us through his perspective on how we can do 0 to 100 in 365 days. Over to you, George.
Thank you, Vijay. I'm quite humbled being invited to this very eminent group of panelists. I must say that if you take the title 0 to 100 seriously, I'm not even at a 20 compared to all the other people who are at a 90 or 100. So I'm a humble journalist. That's all I've done all my life. So my only claim to fame is that every dollar I have earned in my life has come from writing and journalism. Uh, I want to start by, I'm sure some of you tuned into television preparing for this webinar, and I'm sure you didn't miss the fact that the spacecraft Perseverance made a landing on Mars just before 4 o'clock today. And I was thinking about that in the context of the title of this presentation, 0 to 100 in 365 days. And I was saying, Perseverance traveled 300 million miles. It took 9 months. And yet when it descended, it was descending very slowly. It was I forget the exact number of meters per second, but it was very slow. So immigration to me is comparable. It's a journey. You have to do a lot of preparation as you embark on it. I also believe immigration is the hardest human endeavor. I don't think any immigrant would say that they were shoo-ins into whatever they got into. It's a hard struggle. And I think I'm particularly privileged today because I think I'm speaking to what I believe to be the most successful diaspora anywhere in the world. I think you go to any country, and in fact, listening to the landing on Mars, I was wondering whether there was already an Indian there, and whether, and I don't know whether you missed it. I was watching the control room, and there was a woman with a bindi in that control room at NASA in Pasadena.
Yes.
I mean, that is the length and breadth of what we have achieved as a people. And I must say that, for the Indo-Canada Chamber of Commerce to host something like this, I think is wonderful. Let me also tell you that, and I'm still sorry I don't have a presentation because, like I said, especially in the face of such successful people, I didn't know what exactly I was going to say. But let me tell you the story of two journalists who began at the Times of India in Bombay in the 80s. One of them was named Mayank Butt, and the other was named George Abraham. As you can tell, Mayank is come from a very, very different background from George Abraham. My family moved from the state of Kerala. And, I was privileged. My dad is a nuclear scientist. And so I had a fairly good life. But when I moved to Canada, I discovered very quickly that I would have to reinvent myself. I'd been to Harvard. I was fortunate to go on a Nieman scholarship to Harvard. I came here, I did a master's in journalism, and yet it wasn't smooth sailing. But I think I had two things going for me, which I think is true of a large number of Indian immigrants. One is an air of optimism. No matter where we are, I've always said, even if you land me into the gutter, I will look up at the sky and marvel at the beauty of creation. So we are inborn optimists. And the other is what Sharifa, I think, mentioned in her presentation, tenacity. We just don't take no for an answer. And so we can be very pesky as a people. But I've lived in 5 countries. I've seen how the Indian diaspora has thrived, whether it's Dubai or whether it's Qatar or whether it's America or whether it's in India, of course, and now in Canada, whether it's politics, whether it's business. So I think that positive attitude is extremely important to what we do as a people. I also recognize that this topic speaks to something that Vijay mentioned off the top, which is the notion of human capital. And so it's not about what money I have in the bank, and I have very little, I can assure you that. But what I have is that I'm living up to 100% of my potential. I have arrived in a country. I have founded an organization. It was born in my basement. And I am now at the intersection of ethnic and mainstream. I am, just imagine this, we are now in an hour of reckoning around racial equity. And like a lot of my supporters have said, if George didn't invent New Canadian Media, somebody would have to invent it. Because my publication speaks to an immigrant Canada. It speaks to the fact that 20% of Canadians or more are born in another country and come with a set of lived experiences that are very different from the rest of Canada. Like somebody once said, you know, we are the new mainstream. So there will be more people who sound and look like George Abraham than there will be than my neighbor Andre next door. So that's a fact of life. But where is that represented in the media? We all want to have the media be one of us. We want it to speak to our sense of community. And I'm a firm believer, because I was born in India, I'm a firm believer in the notion of a democracy of ideas. Every voice counts, every perspective matters. And that is why we have tried hard at New Canadian Media to be truly a representative of the whole waterfront of immigrant communities in Canada.
George, George, if I may just interrupt, we will take some more questions and we'll go
Sure.
on. But I think fantastic perspective.
Thank you.
The perseverance part, very topical. Something that happened at 4 p.m. and at a 4:30 p.m. webinar, we're talking about it. It can't be better than this. With that, we move on to Ruby. Ruby, welcome, and we will hear you as well. And then we will go to questions. We've got a lot of questions coming, and Ruby is a diversity consultant, so we will this is right up her alley.
Great.
Ruby.
Thank you so much, Vijay. And I just wanted to thank you and Mayank for having me. I have a longstanding relationship with ICC that spans, I want to say, about 15 years. I know I don't look that old, but have had such pleasure to be working with you guys in various capacities in government and in the not-for-profit sector as well. So I'm coming at this discussion as a consultant. I have an independent consulting company called Milieu Strategy. We work with large and small scale organizations, educational institutes, to talk about diversity within organizations. I'm also a contributing columnist to the Toronto Star. Some of my work recently has focused on racialized minorities and how COVID is affecting. So I think rather than going into the full presentation I was going to give, I'd like to specifically speak about maybe COVID. So maybe the next slide as well. That's great. So some of the context right now that I want to speak to is what we're seeing right now is there is a disproportionate amount of cases of COVID that are affecting immigrants and refugees. And I think what we're learning here is that there has been a lot of precarious employment that's been happening with these groups specifically. And I don't want to be, negative about this, but I think the government has started to realize some of the barriers that racialized communities, immigrants, and newcomers are facing. But I feel like now there's an opportunity to move forward. I'm seeing lots more conversations about upskill training, focusing on things like paid sick leaves, although some members of government don't want to pursue those. But we're now actually having some real conversations about systemic barriers that are actually affecting organizations and have been rooted into a lot of our organizations as well. Also, things like hiring bias, stigma, harassment, all of these things are coming to light, and these are all sort of barriers. Even I think the Ontario Human Rights Commission talks about skills and training, and talks about discrimination and some of the ways that hiring practices are being conducted, saying things like having, expecting immigrants to be to have sorry, it's been a long day. Having immigrants to have like Canadian experience as well, and some of those practices can be discriminatory. I'm going to actually just get you to move to next slide, please. So just talking a little bit about how we can actually work together. Right now, there's an opportunity for all levels of the government to work with organizations like TRIAC, for instance, to focus on the improvement. And how do we do this? Well, more funding needs to be put into some of these organizations as well. I am actually a part of the Syrian Canadian Foundation, and I actually saw our executive director as a part of the on this call as well today. She's working so hard right now to ensure that funding is being supplied for the programs that they run. Some of the programs that the SCF runs focuses on entrepreneurship, as well as supporting women. A lot of these organizations are also now pivoting as well and thinking about what COVID is doing and how we can actually create new skills as well. So I think when we're talking about corporate culture, there is a lot of conversations around barriers to integration as well. Sharifa touched base on this, so I don't want to talk too much about it as well. But understanding what that Canadian culture is helpful, but not necessarily are we supplying the right skills. We're talking about language training, but no, we're not talking about that corporate cultural training. Also, I think things like formal mentoring as well that Sharifa had also talked to. Internships, bridging programs are super important. Maybe we'll just move to the next slide. So what can you do as an individual? I think Deborah also talked a little bit about this, about upskills as well. So not all the time would I ever suggest to people to think about training, but there are certain things that you can do in order to support your career. Organizations like Skills for Change do bridging programs as well. Access helps with entrepreneurship. We do know from a lot of the research that we're doing that a lot of immigrants and newcomers find entrepreneurship as a viable path to their new lives within Canada. And we've seen such successful organizations start up like Peace by Chocolate and Paramount Fine Foods as well. Organizations like the Syrian Canadian Foundation is also doing work like that in terms of entrepreneurship. Access as well, and Scatting Court. So lots of programs like that too can actually support you and support with your funding. Internship programs, seek out internship programs. So things like the Ontario Public Service has established internship programs specifically for newcomers. And then I just really want to touch base on two things, because during COVID, I think things are a little bit more difficult when we're talking about seeking out mentorship opportunities and networking opportunities. So little known secret is Sharifa happens to be one of my mentors. It's someone that I've always counted on for advice, and her and my relationship sort of just happened organically through volunteer work. So I think if I can impart two pieces of wisdom onto anybody in this space is, as Sharifa said, just start conversations up with people. I think right now you can go to LinkedIn and just ask people for conversations. I've had maybe more conversations now on LinkedIn than I have in the past, just because of time and being at home and having the availability. Networking is a little bit difficult, but attending events like this, working with the ICCC and other organizations are so crucial. You might not be able to interface face-to-face with people on video chat, but there is no harm to, go to a Deborah or a Sharifa or a George and just basically say, I need some advice. They're very, very busy individuals, but I know just working with them that they've always given opportunities to people. So they might not be able to help you directly, but they will connect you to someone else. So it's okay, don't be shy, seek out those opportunities, talk to people. 9 out of 10 times you're gonna find somebody who's feeling really supportive, especially right now when we're not connected to each other. It's a really good time to help. And I think a lot of immigrants and newcomers and racialized minorities are looking for ways to support each other. So I strongly to encourage you to do so. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ruby. I think that's very helpful. I think and I think something that everybody's echoed across the board is networking is key. I think also networking, and I would add my 2 cents to this, is networking with a passion. Bring passion comes across. You've got to come in there, be interested. And I've seen some people that come in and say, am I actually, don't look at it very transactionally. If I spend 5 minutes, am I going to get something out of this, right? And then I've seen people who do that in a very transactional sense, do not really, get the results. Or people who really passionate, go in there, you will be noticed. People will notice you, right? So don't be, passion is something that I think it's a unlimited fount that you have. So be generous with it, and I think people will notice it. And I think with that we come to our panel discussion. I think it's been a great panel that we have here. We have some questions here. I will the first question is this is for TRIAC. There's people who are asking, would TRIAC mentorships have mentors from the media, event, arts, specifically media and entertainment? You have people from all the other sectors, but is there people are looking for specifically media and entertainment? So Deborah, do you have people are wanting to hear that?
Yeah. Okay, Vijay. Thanks for the question. Yeah. So there's a limit as to how much we can do given the capacity we have, and so we have to take. Unfortunately, we have to take a decision to focus our efforts in those areas where we have the majority of clients. Mm-hmm. And so what we've been seeing coming through is about 40% of the clients who are coming to the mentoring program are from banking and finance and IT. Mm-hmm. And then behind that would be engineering and business functions. So things like HR. We do have quite a few in marketing, supply chain, and those areas. So yeah, we do focus on those. It doesn't mean that we don't from time to time have mentors from some of those other smaller in-demand occupations, but you won't find a large number of mentors in some of those areas. One of the things that we work with 12 community agencies that are partners with this program, because I didn't mention before, but we just to clarify, we do not actually work directly with clients. We work through these partners, and so they're the ones who will also assist us to source mentors from some of those smaller organizations. TRIAC as an organization, as the main recruiter of mentors, would focus on some of those larger occupations. I know it's not a helpful answer to those people who.
No, I think it is, and it is. I think it's good, and I think George, people on media, you've got a media person right here, and I think I saw George typing an answer right there, so you can go after George. He seems like a friendly guy. And he's already typing the answer there. So I wanted to ask a question to all of you. Okay, so this is a question that struck me at times, and I think Sharifa had her perspective on it. Was, somebody comes in, go get started, right? Go become a salesperson in Nordstrom. You could be whatever, and then find your way out. I mean, that's one perspective. There's another perspective. There's another school of thought which says, don't take a job in any area that is not in your core thing, or do not go below. So let me just go around and ask everybody their perspective. Should you take something as a stopgap and still work towards your potential to 100, take something at 30 or 40 or 50, or just wait, right? I mean, so let's go with that. Ruby, if I may ask you that question, what would be your take on that?
Yeah, so actually, within our company, we do hire a lot of newcomers as well. It's part of our internal strategy. So, you know, I've hired researchers, I've hired policy people, I've hired people, you know, who are capable of writing. But for us, it's always been about supporting and helping them move forward. So,
no, but on the other side, I'm talking from an immigrant side. See, there is two perspectives. Right? Some people say, wait it out. Don't, you know, just wait. You know, you will, you know, so versus wait versus take something. What is your thought? I mean, what is your take? What is your advice to people? Because I know for sure there's two distinct schools of thought here.
yeah, I think I come from the school of thought is to gain as much experience as you can. I know people who've, you know, ended up in one career they didn't think they were going to end up in, but have loved it and has flourished through it, have gained connections and networks and are thriving, right? So my perspective would be, yes, if you have an opportunity and you think it's a good fit, then yes, I would strongly recommend it. You think about it.
George, you've already said that you from you know, you are a journalist, but you come here and started different things. So what would you add to that perspective?
I'm decidedly in the stick to what you're good at.
Mm-hmm.
Stick to what gives you the greatest satisfaction. And it goes back to the theme of this panel.
Mm-hmm.
When you say 0 to 100, it's not about 100 million in the bank.
No.
It's about fulfilling what you are good at.
Mm-hmm.
And I think my suggestion, especially to economic immigrants like most of us, obviously this does not apply to, you know, humanitarian people who move for humanitarian or political asylum reasons, but we are all here because we were not satisfied where we were.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you look at my career, I ran a newspaper in Qatar.
Mm-hmm.
I made more money there than I did here. But am I reaching or aspiring to 100 in terms of my potential? Absolutely. And so my suggestion is always do what you're good at and what gives you professional satisfaction.
But I think a counter this, and I'll come to you, Sharifa. Sharifa is already raising her hand there. Okay, if you are in the newspaper business and nobody's reading newspapers anymore, you've got to pivot, right? You got to also look at it a little broadly. You're in the writing business, or you're in something else. So in that sense, you got to distill skills out of what you are doing, and not really, you know, you got to move with the times as well. But we'll come back to you, Sharifa. Your thoughts on this?
I think being a new immigrant, you are coming here saying, I am embracing a new world. Okay. The perfect world is, of course, you get a transfer from your home country, you work for Coca-Cola, but that's not always how it is. So I'm not asking you to go and work at a McDonald's, okay? Because if you are an educated individual, what I'm asking you, if there's an opportunity that might not be, you want to be a creative director at an agency, you might not be able to do that right away because there's criteria, there's experience, knowing how to talk to mainstream consumers. But there might be an opportunity to be a copywriter, a communication manager. It might be 1 or 2 steps down. It's also within the genre, but at least you get your foot into it. But if you are such a stickler and said that, no, I have to get what I am doing the same pay, then you're fooling yourself. You're going to give yourself a lot of strife, you know, and heartache, because being an immigrant, like all immigrant, you got to be very flexible and see what's ahead of you. And if you temporarily have to be a banker because you would learn a lot about banking, good for you. Then you can change to another job. At least you get some Canadian experience.
Thank you, Sharifa. I think I echo your thoughts as well. We'll go to Deborah. Deborah, what are your thoughts on this?
You know, I think we have to distinguish something here. I mean, when we talk about people moving into other jobs other than what they might be targeting, we have to distinguish between jobs that will allow them to utilize some of the skills that they have and that can serve as a springboard for career development, as against the survival type of job, the ones like the McDonald's jobs and those and the call center jobs. I think we have to make that distinction, because I'm all for agreeing that one has to look at different ways of getting to where you want to get. But I don't think you achieve that by taking on those survival jobs. Of course, sometimes economics comes into it, because sometimes people just cannot afford not to work, and so they have no choice. But the problem with that is that they become so preoccupied with, because very often those jobs require a lot more, manual, effort. By the time you get home, you're tired. Sharifa said earlier, job search is a full-time job. And so, it hampers your job search. The other thing, and I come from an HR background, when employers look at a resume and they see that the recent experiences were at a certain level, it impacts how they perceive you. And so, these are some of the considerations that one has to take into account. I'm firmly in the group with the group that says you should stick as much as possible to your where you want to target, but that does not mean that you're going to start off with a job at the same level as. That's not realistic. So that would be my.
I think, thank you very much. So I think we have a little different perspective. Again, as we said, there is you've got different ways to get to it, and I think So another thing that I think people have been talking about is internships, right? Paid internship versus unpaid internships, right? And I just want to run by everybody and have a thought about this. George, your thoughts on paid internships versus unpaid internships, and should people be taking paid versus unpaid? I mean, again, I, as an employer, I'm on the other side of the spectrum. If I were to, I can only offer so many paid internships. If people came to me and said, you want help, and I said, okay, if you want, I can help you, but I just can't pay a salary. I just don't have the budgets for that. So that's the employer perspective, right? So from an employee perspective, what do people say? I mean, and let's start with you, George.
Philosophically, when I founded New Canadian Media, I said we will always pay, especially because most of our writers, in fact, we've had about 300 bylines on our site. That is 300 immigrant journalists who published in a Canadian publication for the very first time. Mm-hmm. And yes, I could have easily said, you know what, I'm giving you the privilege of publishing, so give it to me free. But I think that negates a principle. I mean, we live in a market-driven economy. And if I don't value your work and pay for it, I don't think who will. So I think the principle should always be that if you are deriving value from the work that is being done, you should reward them. Yeah. So that would be my.
So I think that's a key differentiation. However, if you derive value, which means their cost is a variable cost, right? It's a variable cost. It's going to come out of any earnings. I think I agree with that. But you can't have 300 people on fixed payroll and paying them a function. I mean, a certain salary every month or every week. I mean, I think that's not what you're suggesting.
No. Okay.
Thank you. Sharifa.
And there are occasions, sorry to cut you off, Vijay, sure. but there are occasions where you are doing it purely to help somebody.
Sure.
I mean, yes, there are circumstances like that too, for sure.
Okay. Thanks, George. Sharifa, and again, this is from an employee perspective, not from an employer. I think we've heard that, but from an employee perspective, if you've got a paid versus unpaid, an unpaid internship in the segment, as Debroy mentioned, in the broad area or industry that you want to be in, what do you suggest? Is that
there are two ways of looking at it.
Yeah.
There are people that are just dying to get into an agency or corporate. Let's say they want to get into Google, not that it's Google or Amex or whatever, and they're offering you a 6 months internship unpaid. There are people lining up to be able. It's really your individual acceptance of this, because over that 6 months, you're going to learn so much. But of course, for me as an employer, I would have internship where there are actually a lot of institutions out there that are subsidizing. I might not have to pay that $15, but I'm paying that $7.50, which is great. I think that I would be, but also interns, are you putting a lot of time training them? You have your senior staffer. So that's your contribution to the whole gamut of things. So at times when I understand VJ, if you're paying $15 to $20, it's like paying your full-time staff. So I would only go for where there is a subsidies, and it's a good thing to train them so that we'll get them for the next job. But it's an individual call. If you want to go into an internship and pay because you will benefit so much, it's your own call.
Thank you, Sharifa. Ruby, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think a lot of organizations look at it as return on investment. If they're going to like train somebody up, you know, the end goal is to actually like hire this person. So I think when you're making those decisions, I agree with Sharifa. It's up to you if you decide to go that route. But think about like the organization that you're actually you're looking for the internship. Will they have opportunities for you down the road? Do you fit in the culture? Is this a place where you can see yourself? Are you going to actually gain skills, or are they actually just going to use your talent? So once again, up to the person, but maybe weigh the benefits and costs.
Okay. And Deborah, we'll come to you last but not least, but what I'd like you to, from an absolute employee perspective and perspective of getting from 0 to 100 in 365 days, and if you look at that timeline as well, the first 3 months, they get an unpaid internship. Should they take it or just wait for something for a paid? What are your thoughts?
So first of all, I suspect that you're using internship in a very broad sense here to include volunteer placements and so on, because I don't think that legally you can offer unpaid apprenticeships in Ontario unless it's attached to an academic program.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of volunteering or
volunteering, let's call it volunteering. I mean,
I think as a newcomer, you have to be strategic about it, because look, let's face it, you have to find ways of, one, networking, and two, getting experience in the Canadian workplace. If there are no options, if there are no paid options, then the next best thing is to volunteer, and that's no crime in Canada. I mean, people volunteer heavily in Canada. What you have to do, though, is to be strategic about it. It's not just any kind of volunteer. It's the kind of volunteering that will help you, that will be related in some way to where you want to get.
Okay, thank you, Deborah. And I think on that note, we're past our hour, but we will. I just have a couple of announcements to make, and then we'll get to my colleagues. So we at the Indo-Canada Chamber of Commerce, the ICCC, now have a committee for new immigrants and mentorship. The committee will be working on things of how to, get this 0 to 100. In 365 days, we will be looking at working with some of you, TRIAC in particular, and we'll try to see how we can get these going. So we definitely would want insights from all panelists, as well as anybody on the watching us on Facebook or on Zoom. If you have any suggestions or ideas, or if you want to volunteer or join this committee, please send us your names, and we would be interested. Also, I'd like to mention that we have a mentorship committee, which is also, even after the 365 days, let's assume this is the new immigrant, you're no longer a new immigrant, but you're kind of not still at your potential. You're at 50%. I think there is need to look at that and mentor you, and we can still get you to 100%. It might take longer. Our goal is to make sure that we get everybody to 100% in 365 days. But if you don't, I think that's where the mentorship would kick in, and we think we can get everybody to there in a short period of time since. On that note, I'd like to thank everybody. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for. Thank you very much, George, Sharifa, Deborah, Ruby. Thank you very much for making time for us. I think it's highly appreciated. And on that note, I'd like to welcome my colleague, the Vice President for Events, Mr. Surinder Sharma. Suzuji, over to you.
Thank you, Vijay. I think it was a very, very enlightening and rich experience hearing to these four eminent people. They really brought a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge. And I myself in my company, in the last 18 years, we hired 30 new immigrants actually, and we went through excess employment all the time. And I feel it is not only that the new people have to be trained, we also have to go to the medium-sized, small-sized companies and make them feel that it's their responsibility, that they should work closely with track. I mean, from IIT alumni, we have worked very closely. We had a collaboration with track to bring all whatever the new engineers were coming from India. We used to get them trained, and excess employment, especially because they give about 3 months of 50% or more wages, which helps the employer to train people, spend your time. So I think we should all take full advantage. And we within ICC also, I think we should emphasize on our mid-sized, small-sized companies to get into these programs and help the new immigrants. But my impression is the myth of Canadian experience, which was there 25 years ago, it's no more there. I mean, if people are willing, they as Sharifa mentioned, even the 4 Ps she highlighted, and it was very interesting to see, and people really adopt these techniques and move forward. They will definitely have. And it was great hearing the experience of Mr. Deborah Chan, and George Abraham was very, very humble, with a very humble approach. He was speaking from his heart, and really it should definitely touch a lot of, like I said, medium-sized, small-sized companies should learn from such people and bring people. And Ruby, you did a great job, and trying to, I think we really have to change the corporate culture in getting people. So I think, since I mentioned there's no more that myth of Canadian experience, things are becoming a little more smooth now. People should be able to get employed faster and quicker. And Indo-Canada Chamber of Commerce will continue to work and drive this way, that all new people who are coming, they are exposed as soon as possible to the industry and to the business. And we all lead more happy, healthy life as one community in Canada. Thank you very much, and wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and before we go, we'll just run through a couple of our sponsors here. So we've got Tangential, a technology sponsor. Moving on.
I think I'll go forward.
Okay.
Tangential is, as you all know, our major sponsors in conducting these events. The company is owned by Vijay Thomas, who's conducting this program. He's our president. Next slide, please. We're thankful to our sponsors, Turkish Airlines, media sponsors, PTC Punjabi and Weekly Voice, and 2 Indian bankers, especially State Bank of India and ICCC Bank, and financial advisors, Raymond James, headed by Rakesh Vijay, Seneca College, then GT20, and the communication experts, TELUS. So thankful to the sponsors, and thank you to all the members who joined. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening, and stay